Thank you so much for joining us. We want to tell everyone about Jaiya and why I feel this is so important for our own awareness of our magnificent body.
Well, here we are again, folks, giving you some insights into one of the most beautiful things all of us humans do, and one of the most culturally, I would say, misunderstood. In my culture, sex is a taboo subject. Don't talk about it. Do it in the dark, even though it creates life, joy, helps cement love between individuals. There's so much there. Kryon, has repeatedly told us that it was created in love, for love. It's natural. It's beautiful. But even talking about it in my culture often becomes extremely controversial, especially in spiritual groups or even in health groups. So let's see if tonight perhaps we can break some of those cultural barriers with some knowledge. Jaiya is an internationally recognized award-winning sexologist and best-selling author. She's a creator of the Erotic Blueprint Breakthrough and the Erotic Blueprint Quiz. She's also the author of 4 books, including the best-selling one called Red Hot Touch. I want to tell you what she says. I believe, she says, that sex isn't just something we do. Sex is essential to our health, our vitality, and vibrant aliveness.
Jaiya's mission is to help people claim their desires and gain access to erotic ecstasy. Sex techniques don't create lasting passion and sexual satisfaction. In fact, using the wrong technique on the wrong person can create turn-off, shutdown, and possibly even traumatic response. So what is the answer? How do you keep the fire alive and experience sexual fulfillment?
Through client observation and clinical research, she's discovered we all have something called a unique erotic blueprint. So let's uncover your map to ecstasy and experience that very own erotic blueprint breakthrough. Now, there's something else.
Yes, I think what will be very helpful is many have experienced sexual trauma, and I can actually feel in the field right now that for some of you there's even a clenching and a tightening of your body. This doesn't need to be that way, and so Jaiya has worked with those who carry sexual traumas. So Jaiya, I would love for you to begin by sharing with us how we can move beyond those traumas and then open up to our creative life force.
I love that question, and I love this opening and this idea of pleasure and sexuality being something that helps us in our vitality and our aliveness and our wellness. And I really feel like part of my mission is shifting that. We are living in a culture that traumatizes around sex. I don't think that we escape the trauma. I think all of us have some aspect just because we live in such a sex-negative culture that doesn't understand what sex actually is. So I'm going to start with the definition of sex and just kind of expanding our minds about that, because it isn't just a procreative act. Every cell in our body is wired for pleasure. And I don't think that that's not on purpose. I think on purpose we are wired for pleasure, that our bodies are wired for pleasure. But because we have had a rift from ourselves, a rift from love and love of ourselves and respect of ourselves, and a rift from what sexuality actually is and what sex can do for ourselves, we have trauma. And we have trauma because the medical community is afraid of pleasure. We have trauma because the education that we grow up with is afraid of pleasure. I ask audiences all over the world, did you get a positive sex education? And I might get one hand that goes up, but the majority of people did get a sex education. It's just that their sex education was negative messaging about their body, negative messaging about who they are, negative messaging about what sex is. And so this is part of that unraveling. And speaking directly to your question around trauma, that's a journey, that journey to healing. And I'm not a trauma therapist, but I work with a lot of sexual trauma. Everyone who comes to see me has some kind of trauma in their history, be it something that their parents said to them when they were young, all the way to more severe trauma, victims of abuse, victims of trafficking that have come into my practice. And so it begins with breath. I think a lot of us, even maybe now as we're talking about this topic, you mentioned people's bodies tensing, that we all just take a breath together, that we can be in this conversation together. And even grounding your feet on the floor, little things like that as we even talk about this topic. And the healing begins with being able to be with what arises as you think about sex, or as you think about maybe something that happened in your history, that you can breathe with it, that you can be with it, that you have grounding techniques, that you have people who can help you, that you work with someone who can be there to hold you and help you rewire. I really believe that the trauma lives not just in our psyche, but also in our bodies. And I'm always looking at 4 elements when it comes to sexual wellness. What's happening in the energetic field and in the field around you. And we're bioenergetic before we're biophysical. So I'm looking at the bioenergetics of the system. And then we're looking at the physical body. Is the body gripping? Is there still something there from the trauma that's being held in the body? I'm looking at the emotions. What emotions arise as the trauma may surface, or as you're being with that? What emotion comes up when you think about having sex or sexual interaction? And then the last piece is looking at the biochemistry. So what's actually happening in the hormonal system in the body? And once we get those 4 things in a healthful place, we are now in sexual wellness. We are now in sexual vitality. And from there, we start to play. And that's when we start to look at the erotic blueprints and the different types.
I am so fascinated with your erotic blueprint. And what can you tell us about erotic blueprints? And I know you have 5 different types of erotic blueprints. So please share that with us.
Absolutely. Thank you. So the 5 types, the first one is an energetic. And I assume that a lot of people in your audience would be energetics. And so energetics are people who love space, tease, anticipation. Their sexuality may not necessarily be so physical. So when someone goes to touch and collapses the energy, it may feel like too much. Their system may go in overwhelm, especially if there's been trauma in the history. But out here, somewhere out here, playing in the field, that's where their orgasmic capacity may live. And they can go into non-ordinary states of consciousness very easily, have out-of-body orgasms, multidimensional orgasms, making love to the divine. So if you find that your eroticism lives in that soul level or in the level of divinity, you may be an energetic. The shadow side of the energetic, however, can be that they judge harshly sex in the physical, judging a partner who may not be on the same page as them, or feeling like everything's too much, too quick, so they kind of short circuit and dissociate from their body and being in their body during the sexual encounter. So there's a difference between, I just want to clarify, dissociation, where you kind of just, I can't take it, it's too much, so I go out of my body, I float out, which is a trauma response, and having a out-of-body orgasmic experience. That's a very different experience. And then there's the sensual, that's the second type. And the sensual is someone who loves closeness. So where the energetic loves all this space and non-physical eroticism, the sensual is more about this contouring, sexy touch that feels like it's body to body. It doesn't necessarily get super genital focused with the sensual, but can be included in that. So it's this full body experience of pleasure and all of the senses being ignited. So the taste of something delicious chocolate, or a beautiful piece of music that just inspires your body, or it's slow dancing with your lover, or it's seeing something so beautiful that ignites turn on in you. So all of those senses make the eroticism delicious. However, the shadow side can be getting caught up in your head where you're not able to really be in your body because you're thinking about, oh, I forgot to do that thing, or oh, I didn't call that person back, or here's my to-do list. You're running through your to-do list instead of actually enjoying the present moment with your lover or with yourself, with your own body. Any of this, when I talk about eroticism, it has to be partnered. We can have our own eroticism, and I think that's a really important thing, is who am I in my own self as an erotic being? And I think that's part of the beauty of the Erotic Blueprints, is it starts to have us discover, well, who am I? I'm not what the culture says. I'm not what the conditioning and the programming of our culture tells me I should be based on gender or based on identity, but it's really who am I, and I'm going to discover myself because my eroticism starts with me. So the third one is the sexual, and the sexual is what we think of as sex in the culture. And the sexual is someone who's turned on by orgasm, by nudity, by penetration, by what we think of. And when we think of the definition of sex, we think oftentimes of intercourse. And the shadow side of the sexual is that they often think that because someone would say an energetic or a sensual, there must be something wrong with everyone else because they don't fit into the dominant norm. But the sexual, the beauty of them is that they can find arousal very quickly. They love sexuality. So there's a celebration of sexuality. They don't lack depth, but they love, it's simple. It's like, well, yeah, sex is this. It's like great pizza. Like who wouldn't want that all the time? And so for a sexual, they use sex to relax, and everything feels right in the world when it's happening. Whereas like a sensual needs to relax first. They want the massage and the candles and the connection and the romance before they go into the sexual experience. So it's very interesting to see how the different blueprints interplay. And then the fourth one is a kinky, and kinky is someone who's turned on by what is taboo, in the taboo edges and going into the taboo places. There are people who are more psychological kinky and people who are more sensation-based kinky. And what this might look like if you're psychological based would be like role play or playing a game where one person's in control and the other person is surrendering control or power over to that person. And in that play, that can also be really beautiful. And I think we need to redefine what that looks like. Because I think a lot of people hear kink and they think something dark. And I also think that we need to integrate those dark aspects of our sexuality and our desires. There are these polarities that show up between sex and love, or darker desires or lighter desires of love and beauty. And when we start to integrate this, we move into more of a unity consciousness and more of oneness consciousness with this. And I see this a lot in kink, where people are able to get more present. And when they integrate those darker elements or those taboo elements or things that they've shamed, they start to move into a different state of consciousness, which is really interesting to me. In kink, the shadow side is shame, deep, deep shame for the things that we desire. And my own partner was in this category, and I'm a sexologist, and he had a really hard time talking to me about some of his desires, even though I do this for a living. So I can't even imagine what it's like to be with somebody where you don't feel safe with your partner to start to talk about some of these things. And then the last one's the shapeshifter. And the shapeshifter is someone who's turned on by all of it. So if you heard yourself in all of this, then you might be a shapeshifter. And so they love to mold and shapeshift themselves into what the moment's calling for. So if you have a partner and you're a shapeshifter, you will often mold yourself to be what your partner is. The shadow side of that, however, is that you're often not pleased in all the variety that you love and the huge capacity that you have for pleasure. I've seen shapeshifters like 3 hours later, I'm like, are you good? Did you have enough? No. Like they just love, they have this uptake for pleasure, this capacity for pleasure that keeps expanding. And so when I'm working with an energetic, I'm often trying to help them. I am helping them to expand into more capacity like a shapeshifter has, because part of the problem with an energetic is they feel so much that they kind of pop out because it's overwhelming in their system. So how can we increase capacity? So if you're a person who's with a shapeshifter and they've got all this capacity and you're an energetic, then that's a way that we can start to bridge the gap, because it isn't that people are incompatible. If you hear that you and your partner might be a different blueprint, you're not doomed. There isn't an incompatibility issue. It's just simply skill set. And this is a learning and helping your body to learn and to expand into these places.
That's such a beautiful description of the different types, and I already sense there are many who are watching this that are having some personal insights for their own body type. I'd like to ask then, now that we have people tuning in and going, oh my goodness, I totally relate to that blueprint, what then?
Yeah, so the first thing is really knowing who you are. So we start to uncover that if you've heard me talking and you're like, oh, I think I might be an energetic. So the mind tells us one thing, and you can also go take the quiz. That's another way. But I invite you, if you go take the quiz, to really feel each question and feel how your body responds to the responses, because that's the next key is, okay, well, how does my body respond? And to start to map out your body, and a very simple way to do this is just to go through the body with different kinds of touch, from energy touch, where you're barely touching, to more sensual touch, and just playing with different kinds of sensations and seeing, what does your body say? Because our mind may still have all the conditioning programming and is answering from that place, but then the body has a different truth. And so we start to uncover more and more of who we are. And so once you know your blueprint, then the next step is to feed it, to actually feed that part of you that maybe you've been neglecting because you didn't know you were an energetic. Nobody taught you that you were essential, or it wasn't safe for you to really express your desires and who you are. So feeding your blueprint. And then after that, speaking it. So what's the language of the blueprint? And it's not just about the words, but you may even notice me as I move my body a lot as I'm going through the different blueprints, like when I'm energetic versus when I'm sensual. So what is the language of the blueprint, and learning to speak each other's blueprints if you're in relationship. And then healing. So what are the shadow aspects of the blueprint that are putting the brakes on your pleasure and putting your brakes on your aliveness and your wellness and your vitality in the area of sexuality? And so those things I actually talked about at the beginning may lie in those 4 elements of bioenergetics, biochemistry, the physical or the emotional realms, and really looking to go on a healing journey around your sexuality. And then the final piece is expanding. If anything, our blueprints show us where we're limited. And I believe that underneath we're all shapeshifters. And I don't have any research to back that up, just my clinical practice over the last 25 plus years to see that what eventually starts to happen is people heal and they open up and they get free in this expression of sexuality. Another thing that I say frequently is sexuality is oftentimes the final frontier of our personal and spiritual growth, because it's the place where we're least likely to look and we're most afraid to go into. And so this growth that happens as people really learn, I know myself, I'm going to own who I am now, my authentic self, my true self. And then from that, I can live a life of pleasure and live a life of authenticity. And that living is a life of vitality and aliveness and pleasure and such ownership of who you are that everything changes.
I think all you said, I'd like to tell those who often will switch off a sex subject because I don't have a partner in my life, or I'm a senior where I don't even want to know about sex. All the things you have talked about isn't about an intimate act with another person. It really is truly understanding who you are, your blueprint. And I love that you said we are built for pleasure. If there's one thing that you would like our viewers to know when it comes to love, connection, and pleasure, what would that be?
I love this at any age. It doesn't matter what age you are, what gender you are, if you're in a relationship, if you're not in a relationship. Sexuality is you. It's part of you. It's part of what it means to be a human being on this planet. And be in celebration of this gift that you have that is a body, that we are in, these divine beings that are playing in bodies, and that you get to have your own relationship for a lifetime with that. And so little things like practicing pleasure. What brings you pleasure today? Is it shampooing your hair in the shower? Is it a meditation that you have? Is it connecting with nature? That this is life force, that sex is life. And to me, this is all an orgasmic experience, this life that we're in. Everything is pleasure. Everything can become orgasmic. It is about that acceptance of self and acceptance of what is. And that I think underneath it all, we really truly are ecstatic, joyful, loving beings. And once you can accept that love for yourself, that's it. I mean, to me, my front door says sex, but behind it, it's unconditional love for you, from you, because love loves loving itself. And so sex is just one expression of how we love ourselves, and it can look so many different ways. It could be the sunlight on your skin, and you feel that orgasmic pleasure and that orgasmic bliss. No partner required, no age required, doesn't matter. Any of us can have that experience.
You know, one of the things that in my former life before Kryon and all, recording studio engineer, I used to see the musicians would gather around and listen to certain kinds of music, and I saw that. I saw that in spades, as they say. And it's one of the only industries where they would go to each other's gigs, and there was no competition, and they would sit and just go into this ecstasy, no partner involved, none of these things. And music can do this, I think. And where does that fit in your erotic blueprint? Would be the first one?
Energetic or sensual is music. So energetics can feel the vibration. I have a dear friend of mine who's a vocal coach. His name is Christian Demel. And he talks about anytime we're speaking, anytime we are singing, we're making music, we're vibrating each other. And I love this because this is so energetic to me. I'm primarily energetic, and this idea of vibrating each other to me is such an erotic idea, such an orgasmic idea. And then the sensual, for the sensual, it's the sound of the music. It's the way that the music affects the body in movement, in dance, in the pleasure of hearing and listening to the beauty of the music. And so sensual and energetic have a little bit different flavors, but absolutely, I mean, I can listen to a great piece of music and feel ecstasy, feel ecstatic, feel connection with God, like this connection of like music is God. For some people, for musicians, I hear musicians talk about this often, having a spiritual experience with music.
Beautiful. Well, if there's things that you are resonating here, go and have a look at the website. It's theblueprintbreakthrough.com. And Jaiya, is that where people can do the Erotic Blueprint quiz?
Yes, absolutely. So you can go there. There's two different forms of the quiz. There's one that's a free version that you can do, that's a shorter version. And then we have a more in-depth one that you can take that will give you a report based on your blueprint and then how it responds with other blueprints.
And is the majority of your work one-on-one with clients, or are you doing workshops? I mean, it's such a deeply intimate subject. I'd just love to hear how you explore it.
Yeah, how I work is all different ways. So we have everything from online courses, we have live events. I also do have a private practice. It's quite busy right now. I have a waiting list for a year at least, so I'm so fortunate to be in that position. But I think that something's happening in our culture and in the field where people are really craving this journey of sexual aliveness, of sexual awakening. And so I've just seen a lot more people, a lot more interest happening. We've been really flooded with people coming in.
This is a healing program. How would you address that?
Yeah. I have a belief that our healing does involve our sexuality, and that wellness has to include it. That if you're ignoring this part of yourself, if you're ignoring how your pelvic floor works, just on a physical level, if you're ignoring your sexual aliveness or what's possible around sexuality. And I'm not saying anyone's broken. I think that that's a really important thing for people to hear as they're on the healing journey. You are whole and complete and perfect just the way that you are. And I think a lot of people walk around the world thinking that they're sexually broken, thinking there's something wrong with them, thinking that they're not normal. And so the healing journey, if you come from a place of wholeness, and then you can look at, okay, well, where in my sexuality have I disowned something? Where am I not in acceptance? What could I do with my pelvic floor at any age? And I have clients who are, in their 70s and they're just starting this journey and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know these things were possible in my body. I didn't know. And so I work with prostate. I work with people who've had childbirth and they have scar tissue really badly and have pain. So if you're having pain, doctors and professionals oftentimes don't know how to address that. I actually had one client, I did a research project and we surveyed women postpartum. We had over 500 women we surveyed, and one of them said, my doctor just gave me numbing cream. And I have nothing against the medical professional. It's just that they're not necessarily trained in how to work with some of these things. And so well, what's the point of having sex if you just have numbing cream on? How do we instead work with the pain? How do we instead work with what's actually going on there? I also have a dear friend, Esther Perel, and she says, we have to have sex worth wanting. So on the health tip, if you're having pain, if you're having sex that doesn't feel good for you, it's time to heal those parts that either have you afraid to speak up and say no, or say we need to have a change and have a conversation about that, or heal the physical aspects that are going on or the biochemical aspects, as I've been discussing. And then there's all the health benefits to sex and orgasm. Our sex hormones are our youth hormones. There's the spiritual connection that can come from sexuality. For me, it has been my spiritual practice most of my life. When I was very young, my pleasure was about my connection to the divine. And so there are those aspects that also keep us healthy. There's so much research you can look up online. Just start to look up some of the research on things like immune system and immune function and orgasm and being in pleasure and how that fuels us. I really think pleasure is fuel. And when we stop having pleasure and we let our sexuality die, there's an aliveness inside of us that goes away. There's a light that goes out.
I think that's so beautiful to have that connection between pleasure and the divine. There are many cultures that deny pleasure or have guilt and shame around it. So this is such a beautiful opening to the love connection that Source wants us to experience.
So many pearls of wisdom here that because as we talked before the show, it's just not talked about, and especially the health part of it, and everything he has said is just, for many people, is absolutely brand new, because they're not going to talk to anybody about it. And so here you are. And it's so great to have you. So great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really delightful, and I feel super connected to everyone. So I just want to leave you all with just loving yourselves, and no matter where you're at on this journey, you are whole and complete and perfect just the way you are in your growth.
How beautiful.
Thank you.
What a lovely way to finish out this section of the program. Please, everyone, take a 10-minute break and we'll see you back for the Circle of 12.
Greetings, dear ones. I am Kryon. Come a little closer. There are so many things to be said about the energies that almost every single one of you carry, that came not from this life, but from one you've lived before. This entire month we speak of reincarnation. We talk about the things that are important, the things if you've known, the things that perhaps you did not, the system itself that's based in love. Not a process, not something that is random, but something that is carefully designed for each and every single one of you. But dear ones, things change, and we mentioned this earlier in the channel. We'll say it yet again, just for emphasis during the lessons. There are those who still will say that the processes, if you wish to call it that, of spirit, the things that are energetic and the way things work with spirit will always work the same way because God is the same forever. We repeat it so that all of you can hear it, if you've never heard it before. That statement is absolutely true, dear ones. The same forever. God is love. But what has changed and what can change is you. And especially the energy on the planet and how it affects these systems. We've told you many times some of the new tools that you have as light workers and what it means to you now that has changed over the years, especially these last few years since the shift. Reincarnation is one of those processes, one of those systems that has changed because of that. You continue to come and go. It's indeed still a school of energy. But what has changed is what you can do with it, what it means to you, but especially some of the attributes. That's what we dealt with today. Speaking of that which is new, that no one ever told you before, perhaps that you can do now and you could not before. And one of those things we're going to study today. And we're going to take it right to the circle of 12. It is perhaps one of the best things that you will ever experience about your relationship to your past lives today, if you wish. Dimensionality. We speak of it often, we'll speak of it again. We've started telling you that indeed the circle of 12 is a dimensional shift. It's a study in shifting dimensions. The circle of 12 is you going from the dimensionality that you recognize and know and work with into one you don't. And the irony is that the one you don't know is home. It is the one you spend more time than anything else because it represents your soul. Your soul is indeed eternal, dear ones, and just a reminder, this soul of yours is one energy. It's not a thing. It has no measurements, you might say, no quantifiable shape. It just is. It relates to that which you would think about God. It just is. But when you go into this energy, if you really were to sit and realize what was there, it's you. The essence of you is this soul. And this one soul represents every single expression on earth you've ever had. It does not change. Earth is so linear and so singular. And so many of the belief systems from the very beginning, they just echo what's on earth and they apply it to all the heavens and the way everything works, not understanding anything about dimensionality. You get that idea that you come in with a soul and it's just this soul for this earth, and when you leave it doesn't go anywhere, it just gets tortured later. Or perhaps it does go someplace, but it doesn't then come back. Another soul perhaps comes back and it's called you again and you reincarnate. And that's not the way it works. If you start to look at the spiritual logic of it and make sense of it, this school that you're in, this planet, as you go from one level to another and you reincarnate and you come again and you come in and you learn more and you learn more and your consciousness starts to raise, then you start applying it to the planet, then you learn about Gaia, all of these things. It takes one center to do this. You come from one place and continue from that one place, coming and going from one platform, if you want to call it that, a multidimensional thing called your soul. We're going to go there yet again today. But we're going to do something different. In this culture that I'm speaking to you from now, this is a holiday of giving. And in so many cultures, there are times when they stop and give gifts. More than just a celebration, perhaps, of your birth, but a season that they'll set aside. Sometimes they'll set aside a season and just have lights and dancing and these kinds of things, or special foods. In this culture, it's gift giving. Every child knows what this holiday is about. And so we're going to echo that principle. And we're going to do something. You're going to get a great gift today if you choose. You're going to get a lot of gifts today if you choose. But I want you to cognize their reality. More than an exercise, dear ones. This can be real. This exercise, if you wish to call it that, and if you see it as an exercise, is something that you can imagine, because we're putting it in a linear fashion. We have done this now 2 other times, never in a circle of 12, in front of a group. The circle of 12 that we give you now is the one that we present on the Wednesdays. But the circle of 12 that they experienced was given live for the first time, not too long ago, in Sedona, Arizona. I'm going to repeat that so that the thousands who watch this broadcast can participate as well. Profound it can be if you participate. I want you to cross that bridge with me in just a moment, from this known dimensionality to the unknown dimensionality of your soul. A multi-dimensionality which encompasses so many things, but the main factor there is no time. Now, we've said this again. Time is a linear construct for you here. And physicists will agree with that and say there are dimensionalities that do not have that time construct. It can go faster, slower, or even suspend itself with different realities. In your soul, there is no construct at all, no time at all. It doesn't go slower or faster. It just isn't there. That means that everything that ever existed exists at the same time, and the potentials of what will be created are also there. Hard for you to imagine such a thing, but that's the beauty of your soul. I want you to prepare to cross that bridge and come someplace with me right now where something's going to happen you didn't expect. Take my hand. Let's cross the bridge together. Move across the bridge into that area, that energy which is your soul, and feel first of all the peace and the love where all problems drop away. This is an eternal space, dear ones. It represents you long after the problems are gone on the planet. Even long after the planet's gone, you're still here. It represents you before the planet was ever made. It represents you before you were ever a human. That's where you are, home. In this eternal place, dear ones, I want you to go into that theater in the round through that door, which we always go through, and I want you to take your place on that stage. Only the stage looks a lot different this time, a lot different. In front of the chair that you will sit on right now, that beautiful, comfortable chair, is a pit that is filled with embers that are burning. Embers that will consume anything that even goes near them. It's not too hot for you. In fact, you don't even feel heat because that's a linear sensation. But the perspective and the perception is this: whatever goes into those embers never comes out. In front of you, dear ones, you have seen before. It's a group of individuals numbering into the hundreds or thousands, depending upon how long you've lived, because every single one of those individuals is you. It's the expressions you have had on earth sitting in the chairs. Now, we have done something like this before, but not exactly this. How can this be? How can you see the many yous there? Kryon, there's only one of me as a human, and so on and so forth. This is a multidimensional place. Every single time you're a human, you have a specific, unique consciousness. They're all there. Is that hard for you to understand? That you can go back and look at yourself when you were not yourself, but the soul is the same? It's a collection of yous. It's the school that you've gone through. It's the yous that are there. Every single one sitting in the chair, and every single one is holding a gift. And some of those gifts, larger than others, some of them are small. They're all wrapped. And that, dear ones, is a metaphor of something they're about to give you. And you are sitting in the chair, and all is quiet. This is not a celebration. It's not a ritual. This is very different. One by one, as long as it takes, they're going to come up, and each one is going to give you something. What they're about to give you, dear ones, is what you don't need anymore. Carried around right now in your psyche, in your consciousness from past lives. The first one comes up onto the stage, and they look at you, and you look at them, and you realize you're looking at yourself from another lifetime. In some way, you make a connection with every single one of them because you've lived it, and it's in your body now. It's your past life experience. And they take that gift, and they don't give it to you. They throw it in the embers. And they make a statement, every single one. Depending upon the past life, they will say, here are the things that have bothered you from this life. Here's the time that you came in, and these things happened that were inappropriate and that bother you. Here are the things you experienced that you carry around that create the fears, and they toss it into the fire. And they put their hands into a prayer position and say, let it be gone forever in your life. In the audience, there are some very unusual looking individuals. One of them is 3 months old. The 3-month-old in this scenario comes on stage and looks at you and hands the gift and says, here is when we came in and died on purpose, by design, so your parents would do something they wouldn't have done otherwise. This is the sacrifice you made. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? And you carry that around with you. Here's when you didn't even make it. And they throw it into the embers and say, let this be gone. Any fear of death, of early that you would carry for any of your children or potential children, it's gone now. And the little one who is not even supposed to be able to walk walks back into the stage. Here comes another one. Here comes the one that's obviously a big fella. Even if you're a woman, you can appreciate the big fella. He says, this is when you drowned, and it wasn't pleasant. And we were at sea. Do you remember that? We were at sea. It's why you don't like to go to the ocean anymore. Perhaps. Maybe this isn't you. And they have the gift in their hand and they throw it in the fire and say, let the fear that this created in your life be gone forever. One by one, all of these past life experiences which may haunt you, keep you awake, affect your subconscious, keep you from getting well, having fears of death or relationships or even abundance. One by one, they come on stage and you connect and they throw them into the fire. Can you see this? This is the new energy of the planet. This is what you have earned. This is what you deserve. This is your lineage at this time. And the reason this is happening today is for you to get through this, so that when you get finished with all of this ember gift burning, you can get on with why you came here without the burdens that interrupt the things that really are you, your magnificence, what you have to give others, the love you have. Don't let the things that bother you stop from now on. They're gone, if you wish. They're gone. I want you to stay there and just picture, one by one, they keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. And anytime you wish or doubt this, you can return to this place and let them continue, for there may be 1,000 lives here for you. And every single one of them are still inside you, and in some way they affect you. But they don't have to any longer. This is the gift that is given to you this day in this circle of 12 that may be the most profound one you've ever received. I am Kryon. Stay, stay, and so it is.